What happens when a woman orchestrates a public betrayal to test whether her husband still cares, only to discover he'd been documenting her manipulations for months? I invited my ex-boyfriend to our 10th anniversary party, kissed him in front of everyone to see if my husband would fight for me, and convinced myself his calm response meant he didn't love me anymore. Then, at my company's quarterly review in front of the entire sales team, HR handed me termination papers alongside a restraining order, and I realized the man I'd been calling emotionally dead had spent 6 months proving I was the abuser. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Thessaly Hartwell. Everyone calls me Thess. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a real estate agent at Morrison & Associates. I have a husband named Julian, who is 36, a son named Ethan, who is 9, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was justified in everything I did. I was wrong about absolutely everything. This is the story of how I destroyed my marriage by trying to prove my husband didn't love me. This is the story of how I convinced myself that manipulation was the same as passion. And this is the story of how the man I called cold and emotionless showed me that calm doesn't mean uncaring, it means strategic. It happened 3 nights ago. Our 10th wedding anniversary party. I had spent weeks planning it. A private event space at the country club, 50 guests, catered dinner, live music. Everything perfect. Except I had also planned something else. Something Julian didn't know about. I had invited Cade Brennan, my ex-boyfriend from college, the man I dated for 2 years before I met Julian, the man who represented everything exciting and spontaneous that my marriage had stopped being. I told myself it was just a test, a way to see if Julian still cared enough to get jealous, to fight for me, to show some emotion for once in our perfectly calm, perfectly boring marriage. Julian is a civil litigation attorney. He's methodical, organized, professional. He speaks in measured tones and thinks 3 steps ahead. He's good at his job, excellent with Ethan, and completely, utterly predictable. I had been feeling invisible for months. Julian worked late most nights. When he was home, he was reviewing case files or helping Ethan with homework. We barely talked anymore except about schedules and bills and who would pick up groceries. I wanted passion. I wanted spontaneity. I wanted him to notice me. So I invited Cade to the party as my guest. I told Julian I had invited some old friends and left it vague. He didn't ask for details. He never asked for details. The night of the party, Julian arrived late from the office. He was wearing a suit, the same navy suit he always wore to firm events. He apologized for being late, kissed me on the cheek, and started making rounds to greet our guests. Cade arrived about 20 minutes later. He looked good, athletic build, easy smile, casual blazer. He gave me a long hug when he arrived. Several people noticed. Julian was across the room talking to Marcus Chen, his law partner. He glanced over once, nodded politely at Cade, then returned to his conversation. No reaction, no jealousy, nothing. I introduced Cade to several guests as an old friend from college. My mother Linda raised her eyebrows but said nothing. Julian's mother Margaret watched us carefully from across the room. During dinner, I made sure to sit next to Cade. We laughed and reminisced about college parties and road trips and all the adventures we'd had. Julian sat at the other end of the table, with Ethan and some family members. When it was time for toasts, I stood up with my champagne glass. I gave a speech about marriage and passion and how important it was to keep the excitement alive after 10 years. I said that comfort could become complacency if you weren't careful. I looked directly at Julian when I said it. He looked back at me with that same calm expression, unreadable, unmoved. I felt anger flash through me. 10 years of marriage, and he couldn't even pretend to care that his wife was clearly dissatisfied. Near the end of the party, I pulled Cade out onto the patio. The music was still playing inside. A few guests were lingering by the bar. I could see Julian through the glass doors, still talking with Marcus. I kissed Cade, right there on the patio, where people could see us. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't even particularly good. But it was public. And that was the point. I wanted Julian to see. I wanted him to react. I wanted him to storm out onto that patio and demand to know what the hell I was doing. Instead, he stayed inside, talking calmly with Marcus, like nothing had happened. I pulled away from Cade and looked through the glass. Julian glanced toward the patio once, his expression unreadable, then turned back to his conversation. My heart was pounding, but not from excitement, from frustration. Later that night, after the guests had left and we were driving home, Julian asked if I had a good time. I said yes. He asked if all my old friends enjoyed themselves. I said I thought so. He asked if there was anything I wanted to tell him. I said no. He drove the rest of the way home in silence. 3 days later, we're in the bedroom late at night. Ethan is asleep. Julian is sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing his work clothes. He asks me to explain why I invited Cade to our anniversary party. I tell him that Cade is an old friend and I wanted to reconnect. He asks me to explain why I kissed Cade on the patio. I feel my face flush. I ask him how he knows about that. He says that 6 different people mentioned it to him, and that Marcus took a photo. I tell him it was a test, that I needed to know if he still cared enough about our marriage to show some emotion, some jealousy, something. Julian looks at me for a long time. Then he asks if orchestrating public humiliation is how I test love. I tell him that his complete lack of reaction proved my point, that he's emotionally unavailable, that I feel invisible in our marriage. He says that 17 people messaged him after the party asking if we were okay, that his professional reputation matters, that our son was at the party. I tell him that if he spent half as much energy on our marriage as he does on his reputation, I wouldn't need to test him. He stands up and says that he's sleeping in his office tonight, that we'll talk more tomorrow, but we don't talk more tomorrow, or the next day. Instead, Julian becomes distant, polite but cold. He answers questions about Ethan's schedule or bills, but nothing more. 3 days after the party, I'm at work during a property staging meeting. My coworker and best friend Vanessa leans over and asks how things went with the anniversary surprise. I tell her that Julian barely reacted, that the test proved he doesn't care. She says that maybe he's just secure in the relationship, that not everyone needs drama to prove love. I tell her that security shouldn't mean complacency. I'm texting Cade during the meeting, telling him that the test worked, that Julian showed zero jealousy, that I was right about our marriage being dead. Cade texts back, "So what now?" I text, "I don't know yet, but thank you for helping me see the truth." Patricia Lim, our managing broker, walks past my desk. I minimize my phone quickly. She pauses, makes eye contact with me, and continues walking without saying anything. That evening, I come home to find Julian in his home office. The door is open. He's sitting at his desk organizing files. I walk in and see his laptop. There's a spreadsheet open, columns with dates, times, and brief notes. No names, just data. I ask him what he's working on. He closes the laptop and says he's documenting household events for personal records. I ask him what that means. He says it's important to have accurate records of significant events in case they're needed later. I ask him needed for what. He says he's not sure yet, but it's better to be prepared. I notice a labeled folder on his desk. It says, Household Documentation, in his neat handwriting. I ask him why he needs to document our household. He says that attorneys document everything. It's second nature. I tell him he's being paranoid. He says that paranoid is another word for careful. I hear a drawer close. He's locked something inside his desk. The small key clicks as he pockets it. A calendar reminder pings on his laptop. Downtown, 10:35. I ask him what that appointment is for. He says it's personal business. I tell him that married people don't keep secrets. He looks at me with an expression I can't read. He says that's an interesting perspective coming from me. Then he asks me to close the door on my way out. I go to the bedroom alone, and for the first time, I feel something twist in my stomach. Not guilt, not exactly, but something close to fear. The video appeared 2 days later. I was at the office when Vanessa forwarded it to me with 3 skull emojis and the message, "Girl, this is everywhere." Someone at the party had recorded the kiss with Cade. The video was maybe 15 seconds long. You could clearly see me pulling Cade onto the patio. You could see us kiss. And you could see Julian visible through the glass doors in the background, talking calmly with Marcus, seemingly unbothered. The video had been posted to someone's Facebook page with the caption, "When your wife kisses her ex at your anniversary party and you just keep networking, either he's a saint or he doesn't care anymore." It had been shared 47 times. I felt my face burn as I watched it. Vanessa said that half the real estate agents in the city had probably seen it by now, that people were talking. I went home that evening, ready to confront Julian about who had leaked the video, about how we needed to present a united front against gossip. Instead, he was waiting in the kitchen with his laptop open. He turned the screen toward me without saying anything. It was the video, but also screenshots of the comments, people we knew, colleagues, friends, family. Someone wrote, "That's Julian Hartwell. He's an attorney at Chen & Hartwell. His wife just humiliated him publicly." Someone else wrote, "I feel bad for the guy. Imagine your 10th anniversary and your wife does this." Another comment, "If my wife pulled something like that, the divorce papers would be ready by Monday." I told Julian that people were being dramatic, that it was just a kiss, that everyone was overreacting. He scrolled to another comment. It was from someone at his firm. It said, "Julian, if you need to talk or need a referral to someone who handles family law, let me know. You deserve better than this." Julian asked me if I understood what I had done, not just to him, but to his professional reputation, to our family's reputation. I told him that he cared more about looking weak in front of colleagues than about fixing our actual marriage. He closed the laptop. He opened a file folder on the kitchen table. Inside were printed screenshots, a timeline of my text messages with Cade over the past 2 months. He had dates and times. He had my messages saying things like, "I miss the excitement we had," and "My marriage feels dead," and "Want to help me with something at my anniversary party." I asked him how he got those messages. He said I left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter last week. He took photos of the relevant conversations. I told him that was a violation of my privacy. He said that documenting evidence of infidelity planning isn't a violation. It's due diligence. I told him I hadn't been planning infidelity. Just a test. He said that distinction might matter to me. It didn't matter legally. I noticed his phone on the table. A contact had been renamed with a briefcase emoji. The text thread was labeled documentation. I asked him who that was. He said it was someone helping him organize information. I asked him if it was another attorney. He said I'd find out when it was appropriate. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard Julian in his office. I heard his printer running. In the morning, I went into the office while he was in the shower. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk. Screenshots, timelines, printed copies of the video from multiple angles. There was also a folder labeled Witness's Anniversary Event. I heard the shower turn off. I left the office quickly. Later that morning, Patricia texted me asking for a meeting on Monday morning. The subject line said, "Professional conduct and client relationships." Vanessa texted right after, "Patricia saw the video. She's asking everyone in the office about it. People are talking about whether it affects client trust. I felt panic rising in my chest. That evening, Julian was on the phone in his office. I pressed my ear to the door. He was speaking in his attorney voice. Calm, professional, precise. He said, "Yes, I have timestamps for each incident. I've been documenting the pattern for approximately 4 months. I'll need certified copies of everything. Can you prepare those by next week?" 4 months. He'd been documenting for 4 months. The printer started running again. It was past midnight. I went back to the bedroom and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, understanding for the first time that Julian wasn't just upset. He was building something. A case. Evidence. Documentation. And I had no idea how far it had already gone. Sunday brunch with both families was Linda's idea. She thought getting everyone together would help clear the air. She was wrong. We met at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant downtown. They had given us a private dining room in the back. Both my parents, my sister Daphne, Julian's mother Margaret, and a few other relatives. Ethan sat between both grandmothers, picking at his pasta, looking uncomfortable. I arrived 15 minutes late. I had been dealing with a difficult client, or at least that was the story I told everyone. Really, I had been sitting in my car in the parking lot, trying to gather the courage to face everyone. Margaret was the first to speak after we sat down. She asked me directly what I had been thinking at the anniversary party. I told her that I was thinking about how marriage shouldn't mean the end of passion and spontaneity. That comfort can become complacency if you're not careful. She said that marriage means commitment and respect, not public humiliation. I said that Julian had become married to his legal briefs, that I felt invisible, that the kiss was a cry for help that he completely ignored. Several people at the table shifted uncomfortably. My father Robert set down his fork. He said that infidelity, even just a kiss, is never justified by loneliness, that I was making excuses for inexcusable behavior. I told him he didn't understand modern marriage, that his generation stayed together out of obligation, not happiness. He said his generation understood honor and integrity, things I seemed to have forgotten. Daphne, my younger sister, asked if we could speak privately after brunch. She's a child psychologist. I knew what that tone meant. She was going into professional mode. After the meal, Daphne pulled me aside in the parking lot. She said I was exhibiting classic manipulation patterns, that what I did at the party wasn't romantic or passionate. It was calculated emotional abuse. I told her she was overanalyzing, that she was using her psychology degree to attack her own sister. She said she was using her training to identify someone who desperately needs professional help before they destroy their entire family. She said that orchestrating public betrayal to test someone's love is textbook narcissistic behavior. I told her that Julian needed to be shaken up, that he'd become too comfortable. She asked if I had considered how this affected Ethan, our son who was at that party, who saw his mother kiss another man. I said kids are resilient. She said kids internalize their parents' dysfunction, that Ethan was already showing signs of anxiety according to his teacher. I asked her how she knew that. She said Julian told her, that he's been reaching out to family members for support because I clearly wasn't giving him any. She gave me an ultimatum: get therapy, apologize to Julian sincerely, commit to actual change, or she would support Julian in whatever legal steps he decided to take. I told her she was betraying me. She said I had betrayed myself. Then she walked away. That Wednesday, I was at the gym in the locker room. Another mother from Ethan's school approached me. Her name was Jennifer, and her son was in Ethan's class. She asked if we could talk. She said that Ethan had been acting out at school, that he'd gotten into a fight with another boy, that the school counselor had called her because her son had been involved. She said that her son told the counselor that Ethan said his mom didn't love his dad anymore because she kissed another man. I felt my face burn. I told her that was a private family matter. She said it became a public matter when I did it at a party in front of 50 people, and it ended up on social media. She said that what I did was emotionally abusive, not just to Julian, but to Ethan. Other women in the locker room had stopped to listen. Jennifer said that her sister had been in an emotionally abusive marriage for years, that the signs were always the same: public humiliation, gaslighting, manipulation disguised as testing or passion. She said I should be ashamed. Then she left. I stood there, surrounded by silent women, all of them staring at me with judgment and disgust. I grabbed my bag and left without changing. That evening, I found Ethan sitting outside his bedroom door. His face was streaked with tears. He asked me why I kissed Mr. Cade at the party. I froze. He asked if it meant I didn't love Daddy anymore. I knelt down and told him that I loved Daddy very much, that I was just trying to make Daddy pay attention to me. He asked if making Daddy sad means you love him. I didn't know how to answer that. He said that his friend Jaden's mom kissed another man, and then Jaden's dad left. He asked if Daddy was going to leave. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Julian was standing there, having heard everything. His face was unreadable. He told Ethan gently that they would talk tomorrow, that it was time for bed. After Ethan went to his room, Julian told me we needed to discuss next steps. In his office, I saw his desk calendar. A date 3 weeks away was circled in red. Next to it was a sticky note: "Serve papers, confirmed." I asked him what that meant. He said it meant exactly what it looked like. I asked if he was really going to divorce me over one kiss. He said it wasn't about one kiss. It was about a pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse that had been escalating for months. I told him he was being dramatic. He pulled out a folder. Inside was a printed timeline. 6 months of incidents, dates when I had tested him by flirting with other men at firm events. Times when I had accused him of not caring because he didn't react the way I wanted. Screenshots of messages where I complained to friends about how boring and emotionally dead he was. He said he had been documenting everything, because that's what attorneys do when they see a pattern of behavior that might require legal protection. I told him that sounded insane. He said that emotional abuse often sounds insane to the abuser. Then he asked me to leave the office. I went to bed alone, listening to sounds from down the hall. Julian on the phone, speaking quietly, professionally, and for the first time, I understood that my husband wasn't being dramatic or vindictive. He was being an attorney, and I was about to find out what that meant. Saturday afternoon, Daphne asked me to meet her at the Riverside Park. She said we needed to talk. It was cold and grey, the kind of day that matches your mood when everything is falling apart. Daphne was standing by the playground, watching kids on the swings. She didn't smile when I approached. She said she had been researching narcissistic behavior patterns, that I checked multiple boxes. I told her she was being cruel. She said I had been cruel for months, and that she wasn't going to watch me destroy my family without at least trying to intervene. She said that orchestrating a public betrayal to test someone's love is emotional abuse. That gaslighting Julian by telling him his calm response proved he didn't care was manipulation. That involving Ethan, even indirectly, in my games was damaging. I told her that Julian and I had been growing apart, that I needed to do something dramatic to wake him up. She asked if I'd considered therapy, couples counseling, an honest conversation. I said I tried talking to him, that he never listened. She said that from what she could see, I never actually talked. I tested, I manipulated, I created drama, and then blamed him for not responding the way I wanted. She said that I needed professional help, that I was exhibiting signs of a personality disorder that required intervention. I told her she was overreacting. She said that Ethan's teacher had called her, that Ethan had been having nightmares, that he'd wet the bed twice in the past week, that he'd told the school counselor he was worried Mommy and Daddy were going to split up like his friend's parents. I felt something crack inside me. Daphne said she was giving me one chance. get therapy, apologize to Julian sincerely, commit to actual, measurable change, or she would support Julian in whatever legal action he took, and she would provide a professional statement about what she'd observed. I asked if she was seriously threatening to testify against her own sister. She said she was choosing to protect her nephew from further emotional harm. Then she walked away, leaving me alone by the playground. That evening, Ethan stood in his doorway and asked me a question that broke my heart. He asked why I kissed Mr. Cade. I tried to explain that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. He asked if I didn't love Daddy anymore. I told him I loved Daddy very much. He asked why I wanted to make Daddy sad. I said I didn't want to make Daddy sad. I wanted to make him show he cared. Ethan looked at me with his serious brown eyes. He asked if making someone sad is how you know they love you. I couldn't answer. Julian appeared at the top of the stairs. He had heard everything. He told Ethan they would talk tomorrow. He told me we needed to discuss something. I followed him to his office. He said that Margaret had offered to take Ethan for a while, to give him some stability while Julian and I figured things out. I said he couldn't take my son away from me. He said Ethan needed a stable environment, and our home was not currently stable. I accused him of turning his family against me. He said he hadn't said anything to anyone, that my actions spoke for themselves. I looked at his laptop. He had closed it quickly when I entered, but I'd seen the browser tabs, emotional abuse documentation, parenting plan development, restraining order criteria. I asked him if he was planning to get a restraining order against me. He said that depended on whether my behavior escalated. I asked what that meant. He said that emotional abuse often escalates when the abuser feels they're losing control, that he was prepared for multiple scenarios. I told him he was treating me like a criminal. He said he was treating the situation like what it was, a pattern of abusive behavior that needed to be addressed through proper legal and therapeutic channels. Then he asked me to leave his office. Monday morning, I received an email from Patricia. She wanted to meet at 9 a.m. The subject line said, Professional Conduct and Client Relationships. Vanessa texted me. 3 clients requested new agents. One of them specifically mentioned the anniversary video. Patricia is doing damage control. I felt sick. That night, Julian came home late. I was waiting in the kitchen. I asked him where he had been. He said he had a meeting. I asked what kind of meeting. He said a consultation. I asked with who. He said that was privileged information for now, but that I would be informed through proper channels when appropriate. I asked if he was really going through with this. He said that I had made my choices. Now he was making his. He said that everything would be handled properly through appropriate legal and professional channels, that there would be documentation, that there would be consequences. I told him he was being vindictive. He said he was being protective of himself and of Ethan. Then he went to his office and locked the door. I stood in the kitchen alone, understanding for the first time that I had pushed my husband past some invisible line, and that there was no going back. I met Cade at a coffee shop near my office on Tuesday during lunch. I had texted him saying I needed to see him, that everything was falling apart. He was sitting at a corner table when I arrived. He didn't smile. I sat down and immediately started talking. I told him that Julian and I were separating, that Julian was being vindictive and cruel, that he was turning everyone against me. Cade looked uncomfortable. I said that I thought we had a real connection, that maybe the kiss at the party was the universe telling us something. He interrupted me. He said that he couldn't be involved in my marriage drama, that what I did at the party was manipulative and honestly kind of disturbing. I asked what he meant. He said I had used him, that I had orchestrated the whole thing to manipulate my husband, that he felt like a prop in my game. I told him it wasn't like that. He said it was exactly like that I was too intense and honestly kind of scary. He said he had talked to some mutual friends from college, that this kind of behavior was a pattern with me, that I had always been dramatic and manipulative, He said he didn't want to see me anymore. Then he left. I sat alone in the coffee shop, staring at my untouched latte, understanding that I had destroyed my marriage for a man who thought I was scary. That evening, I went home and tried to talk to Julian. I found him in his home office. File boxes were stacked on the shelves, each one labeled with date ranges. I told him I had made a terrible mistake, that I wanted to work on our marriage. He said that some behaviors couldn't be fixed through conversations. They required professional intervention and legal boundaries. I asked what he meant. He said he had been consulting with professionals to ensure everything was handled correctly and ethically, that I would receive formal documentation soon. I asked if he was filing for divorce. He said I would be formally notified through appropriate channels. I looked at his desk. There was a spreadsheet open on his laptop. Columns labeled date, incident, witnesses, documentation. There was a cloud sync notification. File uploaded successfully. A calendar reminder popped up. Downtown 1420. I asked him what all of this was. He said it was evidence. 6 months of documented incidents, witness statements, professional assessments, video evidence, text messages, everything organized and authenticated. I told him he was acting insane. He said that documenting abuse isn't insane, it's necessary. I asked if he was really calling me abusive. He said that orchestrating public humiliation, gaslighting, manipulation, and involving a child in emotional games was the definition of abuse. He said that emotional abuse is still abuse, that it causes real harm, that it has real legal consequences. I asked him what he wanted from me. He said he didn't want anything from me anymore. He wanted to protect himself and Ethan. Then he told me to leave his office. The next morning, I was parking in the garage under my office building when I saw Julian's car. I walked over. In the back seat were labeled files, legal pads, and a briefcase. His phone was visible through the window. A contact was renamed with a gavel emoji. The text preview said, "Client review scheduled, all exhibits prepared." I felt my hand start shaking. That afternoon, Julian told me that I should prepare for significant professional and personal consequences. I asked what he meant. He said that emotional abuse has real-world ramifications, that he had ensured everything was documented according to proper legal standards. I asked if he was threatening me. He said he was protecting himself and Ethan, that his responsibility was to them, not to protecting my reputation. Then he told me he was taking Ethan to stay with Margaret for the week, that Ethan needed stability during this transition period. I asked what transition. He said I would understand very soon. He packed a bag for Ethan. They left together. Ethan waved at me from the car window, but he didn't smile. I stood in the empty house looking at Julian's desk calendar through the office door. The circled date was 3 days away. I had 3 days before whatever Julian had been planning for 6 months would finally happen, and I had absolutely no idea how to stop it. Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. I was sitting in the conference room at Morrison & Associates for our quarterly review. It was supposed to be routine. Performance metrics, sales numbers, goal setting for next quarter. Patricia was there, so was Sandra from HR. They both looked serious. Patricia said that we needed to discuss some concerns that had come to the firm's attention. I felt my stomach knot. She said that 3 clients had requested new agents over the past 2 weeks. One had specifically cited concerns about my judgment and professionalism. Sandra pulled out a folder. Inside were printed screenshots of the anniversary video. It had been sent to the firm's general email address by someone claiming to be a concerned client. Patricia said that the video showed behavior that reflected poorly on the firm's reputation, that clients need to trust their agents with some of the most important transactions of their lives. That trust requires good judgment. I started to defend myself, to say that my personal life shouldn't affect my professional standing. Sandra interrupted. She said they also had documentation of me using company devices for personal matters during work hours. Screenshots of text messages with Cade discussing the anniversary plan. Timestamps showing I was on my personal phone during client meetings. Patricia said that individually, any one of these issues might be addressed with a warning, but the pattern suggested conduct incompatible with the firm's values. I asked what that meant. Sandra said it meant termination was being considered. There was a knock on the conference room door. A man in a grey suit entered. He asked if I was Thessaly Hartwell. I said yes. He said, "You've been served," and handed me a thick manila envelope. Then he left. I sat there holding the envelope, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Patricia said we could take a moment if I needed. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The first document said, "Petition for Restraining Order." Below that, Julian James Hartwell, Petitioner versus Thessaly Hartwell, Respondent. I flipped through the pages. The words blurred together, but certain phrases jumped out. Pattern of emotional abuse and harassment. Documented incidents spanning 6 months. Detrimental impact on minor child. Witness statements from family members and professionals. There was an exhibit list, 73 items. I scrolled through with numb fingers. Complete video of anniversary party kiss from multiple angles. Screenshots of text messages between respondent and Cade Brennan, including message stating, "I need to test if Julian still cares." Witness statements from 12 party guests describing behavior as calculated and cruel, school counselor reports, documenting Ethan's anxiety, nightmares, and behavioral changes. Professional assessment from Margaret Hartwell, retired family court judge, 30 years experience, comparing behavior patterns to emotional abuse cases, timeline documenting 6 months of escalating tests and manipulations, text messages to friend Vanessa stating, "I need to make Julian jealous so he'll actually care again," screenshots of social media posts complaining about Julian being boring and emotionally dead, documentation of respondent admitting to testing, petitioner's love through manufactured jealousy, therapist recommendations for treatment of narcissistic behavior patterns, statement from Daphne Wren, licensed psychologist, noting manipulation tactics consistent with personality disorder. The list went on and on. At the bottom was a section labeled Temporary Orders, Primary Custody, granted to petitioner, pending psychological evaluation. Supervised visitation only for respondent joint accounts, frozen pending asset division, respondent prohibited from marital residence. No contact provisions, except through legal counsel. Protected parties, Julian Hartwell, Ethan Hartwell, Margaret Hartwell. At the very end was Julian's personal statement. I forced myself to read it. For 6 months, my wife has engaged in a pattern of emotional abuse designed to test whether I loved her. She orchestrated public humiliation, involved our son in her manipulations, gaslit me when I expressed concern, and ultimately kissed another man at our anniversary party to see if I would fight for her. I did not fight. I documented. Because I am an attorney, and I know that emotional abuse is still abuse. That manipulation is still harmful. That subjecting your child to instability is still damaging. I responded not with jealousy or rage, but with evidence. Not with violence or retaliation, but with legal protection. My son deserves a stable home. He deserves parents who model healthy relationships. He deserves to understand that love is not proven through jealousy or manipulation, but through respect and commitment. I am filing for this restraining order, not to punish my wife, but to protect my son and myself from further emotional harm while we address this situation through appropriate legal and therapeutic channels. This is not revenge. This is accountability. I read it twice, 3 times. Patricia cleared her throat. She said that in light of these developments, The firm had made a decision. Sandra slid a document across the table. Termination letter. Effective immediately. Patricia said that the firm couldn't be associated with an employee facing a restraining order for emotional abuse. That clients needed to trust us. That my conduct had violated that trust. I tried to argue, to say this was unfair, that Julian was exaggerating. Sandra said that the evidence was extensive and detailed, that this wasn't a he-said-she-said situation, that there were witness statements from a retired judge, a licensed psychologist, teachers, and multiple colleagues. Patricia asked for my laptop and keycard. I surrendered them. Security was called to escort me from the building. As I was walking through the office, I saw Vanessa at her desk. She looked away. In the lobby, I saw them through the glass doors. Julian was standing by the reception desk. Next to him was his attorney, a woman in a dark suit with a briefcase. Margaret was there too, and Ethan was holding Margaret's hand. Julian met my eyes once. His expression was calm, professional, resolved. Then he turned away to speak with his attorney. I was escorted out to the parking lot by security. They watched me get in my car. They waited until I drove away. I drove home in a daze. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a notice taped to the front door. Temporary restraining order. Julian Hartwell has been granted sole possession of marital residence pending custody hearing, December 10th. Thessaly Hartwell is prohibited from entering, contacting, or harassing the protected parties listed below. Protected parties: Julian James Hartwell, Ethan Hartwell, Margaret Hartwell. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and prosecution. 4 boxes were stacked in the driveway. My name was written on each one. I opened them. My clothes, my toiletries, my shoes, some personal items. Everything else was inside the house, where I was no longer allowed to go. I looked through the living room window. Julian, Margaret, and Ethan were sitting at the kitchen table. They were making dinner together. Ethan was laughing at something Margaret said. It was the first time I'd seen him genuinely happy in weeks. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from an attorney named Rebecca Torres. Ms. Hartwell, you've been referred to me given the restraining order and custody issues. I need to be direct with you. Based on the evidence presented, particularly the documented pattern of emotional abuse, the public humiliation incident, and the impact on your child, you're facing substantial challenges. The court takes emotional abuse seriously, especially when there's video evidence and professional witnesses, including a retired family court judge. We need to meet immediately to discuss damage control. Given the circumstances, I have to tell you that regaining primary custody will be extremely difficult. Please call me back as soon as possible. I sat in my car and read through the exhibit list again. Every text message I'd sent planning the test. Every social media post where I'd complained about Julian. The video from every angle. Witness statements describing my behavior as cruel, calculated, manipulative. School reports about Ethan's anxiety. Margaret's professional assessment comparing my behavior to domestic abuse cases she'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Daphne's statement as a psychologist identifying manipulation tactics. A timeline showing 6 months of escalating tests and games. All of it organized, authenticated, certified, all of it proving exactly what Julian had claimed, that I was emotionally abusive. And at the bottom of it all was Julian's statement, the one that hit hardest. He hadn't responded with jealousy. He'd responded with documentation. He hadn't fought for me. He'd protected himself and Ethan. He hadn't proven his love through drama. He'd proven his strength through restraint. For 6 months, while I was creating tests and manufacturing jealousy and orchestrating public betrayals, Julian was quietly building a legal case with the precision of an attorney and the patience of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. I had thought his calm meant he didn't care. It actually meant he was documenting every single thing I did, so that when the time came, he could protect himself and our son with irrefutable evidence. I looked through the window one last time. Margaret was helping Ethan with something at the table. Julian was on his phone, probably talking to his attorney or Marcus. They looked like a family, a functional, peaceful, stable family. Without me. I had spent 6 months testing Julian's love, and he had spent 6 months proving that he loved himself and our son more than he was willing to endure abuse. The man I called emotionally dead had been the most emotionally intelligent person in the marriage. The man I accused of not caring had cared enough to protect himself legally and professionally. The man I tried to make jealous had been too busy building an evidence file to waste time on games. I loaded the 4 boxes into my car. I drove to a budget hotel with my belongings, a termination letter, a restraining order, and the devastating understanding that I hadn't tested Julian's love. I had tested his patience, and I had finally found its limit. I sat on the hotel bed and looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman staring back was a stranger. She was someone who had destroyed her marriage, her job, her reputation, and her relationship with her son, all to prove that her husband didn't love her enough. She was someone who had confused manipulation with passion, cruelty with testing, abuse with love. She was someone who had been so obsessed with making her husband react that she never noticed he was reacting, just not in the way she wanted. He was reacting with documentation, with evidence, with legal protection. Because that's what you do when you're being abused. You protect yourself. And that's exactly what Julian had done. I picked up my phone and called the attorney, Rebecca Torres. When she answered, I said the words I should have said 6 months ago. I need help, not to fight the restraining order, to understand why I did what I did, and to make sure I never do it again. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that was the first step. But it was a step I should have taken before I destroyed everything. Now all I could do was live with the consequences, and hope that someday my son would understand that his father did what he had to do, not to punish me, but to protect him. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.